As a project manager, your most important task will be to create an environment that is built on trust and is productive and collaborative to effective and efficient project management. No one likes to work with a dictator like project manager, and it leads to a non-productive environment. You will also need to watch out for skill gaps. You may not realize that there are skills or capacity gaps until work starts. For example, if the project involves procuring various materials and the staff lacks procurement skills, problems could arise in the project and work could get affected. Therefore, you assess these gaps and take necessary actions. Understand that skill gaps are risks and need to be mitigated. If they are not resolved, they will cause problems for the project.
Wow! I now have a fair idea of why people management is important and how I can manage and develop my team.
I am glad about that. There is one more thing that can guide you in the way you can approach projects. The principles of project management. They show you how to work and how to use different tools to plan and implement projects. There are 5 core principles of project management. These principles define a good project as well-governed, integrated, participatory, comprehensive, and adaptive. You can remember them using the acronym WIPCA. Go through each of these principles to understand what it is and why it is needed.
Great! The principles of project management are a really good guide to developing a systematic approach to any project.
True, and these principles are central to the role of the project manager. If the manager follows these principles, the project is more likely to be successful. Adesh is considering how to apply the principles in the context of the Delta River project. What factors should Adesh consider to make the project participatory? Which of these factors should Adesh consider to make the project more adaptive?
So much better now. You also mentioned dividing the project into. The project looks so much better now. You also mentioned dividing the project into smaller parts, right?
Yes, dividing it into smaller, digestible parts makes it easier to plan and manage. We use the simplified project phase model to achieve this.
Please tell me more about this model.
The simplified project phase model has 4 phases: project design, project planning, project implementation, and project closure. This is how it looks.
Why do we need the simplified project phase model?
Using a project phase model approach makes it easier to plan and manage the project. The approach specifies what should be covered in each phase of the project and provides a comprehensive, balanced, and flexible structure to implement projects successfully. The simplified project phase model breaks the entire project into smaller pieces, and it also defines the terms from one phase to the other. The actions performed in one phase are carried over to the next one. There can also be overlap from one phase to another.
So, I may be starting one phase before the prior one ends.
Yes, and even in cases where one phase must be completed before the next one begins, there may be aspects of one phase which should be considered in other phases.
Can you give me an example?
Yes, one example would be project closure. While the closure activities take place towards the end of the implementation phase, the aspects of closure are considered right from the design phase and incorporated into the planning phase as well.
The simplified phase model looks like a great tool.
Yes, there is another tool called the triple constraint triangle, which helps you identify project constraints you will need to be mindful about.
What does it look like?
A triple constraint triangle looks somewhat like this. The three constraints on the three edges of the triangle are cost, scope, and time. Select each constraint to learn about it.
Fine. So, for my project, I will have to consider the same three constraints, right?
Yes, these remain pretty much the same for all projects. The triple constraint triangle for Delta River project looks like this.
So, if any one of these constraints changes, will it impact the other constraints, or will they stay the same? If the project timeline changes and we need to build the latrines faster, what are our options?
Adesh, did you notice there is an interdependency between the triple constraints?
Yeah, I see that. But how do I ensure that there is a balance between them?
Let's see how you can do this. The project manager must ensure that the triple constraint triangle always stays in balance. The scope is the work we need to do within the parameters of time and costs. If we cannot achieve the defined scope in the given time frame, or if the resources are insufficient, then the triangle is not balanced. These constraints are interdependent. Whenever one of these is restricted or extended, the others will also need to be adjusted. In the case of the Delta River project, if you plan to provide access to quality latrines to 1,000 households, and suddenly the number of beneficiary households increases to 1,500, you may consider that the project scope has increased. This is sure to pose a problem in project implementation. This increased scope will require the cost or resources and the time to be proportionately increased. All in all, the project manager must understand the relationships and trade-offs between the constraints to effectively manage the project. Select the Close button to continue.
Got it. We should keep things flexible so we can adjust the constraints if need be.
Yes and no. What I mean is that, while the constraints have to be adjusted, in certain cases a constraint can be inflexible. Confused? Let me explain this better. An inflexible constraint is the most critical factor, and it must be contained for project success. Any change in such a constraint may have a negative impact on the project. Let's look at the examples of time and cost as inflexible constraints.
Then, are all constraints always inflexible?
No. Sometimes constraints can also be flexible and adaptable. They do allow us to accommodate minor changes. Here is how you can understand this in the context of the Delta River project.
Great info, Esther. That means that we need to understand which constraints are flexible and which ones are inflexible.
Absolutely. By classifying the constraints, you can have better clarity and control over your project. Also, make sure to get all your stakeholders to agree upon the constraints early in the project. It is very difficult to negotiate these constraints after the project is launched.
Sure, I will remember that.
Now that Adesh has the background of the Delta River project and the knowledge of the simplified project phase model, what should be Adesh's next step? Choose your response and select Submit. For successful project implementation, Adesh needs additional information. What should be Adesh's next step? Choose your response and select Submit.
Thanks for these inputs. I feel